Welcome back to Beer Time with Books, another quarantine edition, and another episode with our new guest. He made
Hello.
it back.
I'm back. The long drive.
It's good to have you via the Zoom room. Looks like Danny's popping in as well.
Hey guys. Fancy meeting you here.
In the virtual room, a little reminiscent of the various rooms of the end of this book.
So reminiscent of.
Way to tie that in.
That was real smooth.
I'm excited to get into all of that. Corey is going to be doing the summary once we get past our classic corners, and what a summary it is. We'll be getting into specifically that section of the book. Should be a good time. But in the meantime, we're hitting up the classic What Are You Drinking? And I think this one's going to be interesting because there are a few beers that are almost the same, but not quite. So who wants to start with some What Are You Drinking this evening?
I mean, I'm the most boring. I'm still with the Boulevard Wheat since I have not purchased any alcohol in 2020. So still going with the old case that I got in the basement.
Perfect.
And that's what you had last time. We're carrying that wheat over, and you inspired us. So Corey's with the regular wheat. This is Brian, and Boulevard had recently released a variety pack of their wheat where some of them have a fruit infusion in them. And so we got that pack finally. We've been looking for it in the store. They have well, I'll let Jamie say hers, but one of them is a kiwi. So it's Boulevard wheat with kiwi. And I thought it was going to be just a little touch of kiwi, but it is pretty robust.
It's like fruit juice.
It's very fruity, and I thought it was going to be like more beer than like what a Radler is. I'd say it's like a similar juice level to a Radler, if not maybe a little bit more, especially on the kiwi one. But that's what I'm going for tonight. So that's 2 for the wheat.
And this is Jamie. And as Brian said, we got that variety pack. So I have also a flavored wheat, but it is grapefruit. And it's great. I like it. I love grapefruit in beer. I think it's a nice compliment.
Yeah, I think of the 2, I like the grapefruit more.
Yeah.
Are they like sour-ish?
No.
Not
in
like
my
Radlers?
opinion.
I mean, like, in the sense that those fruits are a little bit tart, sure, but not like a sour.
Got it. This is Danny. I'm also boring. I'm drinking what I had last time, the Twisted Logic IPA from Defiance Brewing Company.
So
They've got a sick can also.
2 repeats.
I'm showing everybody, but it's so cool.
So we're
I'm a
really
fan.
keeping it Midwest for this beer selection today. I've seen a few people on Instagram on the beer side because they follow anybody that has beer in their name, so we get a few coming our way. Beer Time with Books on Instagram, that they get like beer shipped in from different breweries, and they get a little bit more exotic, I'd say, with those packs. So that might be worth choosing in the meantime. But yeah, a couple new beers on this one, and then also let's run into some recent media. So Corey, yours last time was a bigger timeline to choose from, but now that you have an episode under your belt, what's some recent media you've been consuming since the last episode?
Ooh, I don't know if this is like a trap based on everything that's been going on.
Yeah.
But, a lot of it's been educational, but in the, when I want to just unwind, I've been getting into JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. I don't know how many people are familiar with it, but it is memed a lot on the internet, and I just had to see what it's about. And it's basically an action anime. There's very little depth. The first 10 episodes are very tough to get through, but after that, it's a really enjoyable ride.
Nice. Yeah, for me, a similar thing, just to kind of keep this episode in its place. Definitely, since the last episode, a lot's been going on in the country since what had happened in Minneapolis with George Floyd. And as Corey had mentioned, I think we've all kind of been taking some time to read some educational material and just kind of embrace what's going on and learn a little bit more about, our fellow countrymen in a time that it really feels like those voices should be elevated. So for me, I'd put it on Instagram, but Ta-Nehisi Coates, Between the World and Me, I'd just seen that on some book lists, and I'd picked that up last weekend, and just the perspective of him coming up in his education and kind of looking for role models that maybe weren't always present, among other things. It was just very eye-opening, and as I had said on Instagram, Toni Morrison had said, who I'm also listening to Beloved on audiobook, but she said it's required reading, and I think that it really is. It's quite well done. And so I've been getting into that, and then I just want to shout out for one of the shows that we finished since last time, Nathan for You. We had watched Nathan for You, which was on Comedy Central with Nathan Fielder, and it was a wild ride. Basically,
it's an
just
insane show.
Just a quick sum up to get through my portion here is he just goes to small businesses to help them out in usually terrible ways under the guise of he went to business school, and that's the only qualification that he has. And the final episode actually moved away from that format and turned into this hour-and-a-half long documentary instead of the normal format. It was just the craziest season finale, just in terms of what the show actually is and what the season finale was. It was incredible, and apparently the year that we didn't go to True False because of weather, he showed it at True False. So he had just shown this really random documentary of one of the people that he had on his show previously following this really weird chain of events, and it was kind of heartwarming, kind of weird, and a great ending to the show. So shouts out to Nathan for You.
All right. This is Jamie. I don't know. Since the last episode, I finished reading Where the Crawdads Sing, which I was pretty meh about, I'll be honest. It's a fun story, but here's the thing. Before I read this, I heard Brian and his mother talking about it, and they were talking about the ending and the last page, and you don't know what's gonna happen. And I guessed what was gonna happen forever ago, and so when I got to the last page, I was like, "That's it, okay." It was fine. I also read a poetry collection called Counting Dissent by Clint Smith that I really, really loved. I think everybody should read it. It's also about race in America and coming of age in America. And it's just really beautiful, really easily digestible poetry, modern, contemporary poetry that I really enjoyed. And I've started 4 other books also that I'm all 30 pages into because that's the kind of person that I am. And Brian and I are watching the new season of Queer Eye. That's about it.
I've never heard of Nathan for You ever. I have no context for that show, but I just looked it up, and the first thing that I saw was that one of his suggestions was creating a coffee shop called Dumb's Starbucks.
Yes, and it made national news.
That's the funniest thing I've ever heard.
That was a quality episode.
It's legal under parody law to use their copyright. It's a great episode. Phenomenal. You should watch Nathan for You.
Yeah, it's good. But in the meantime,
also on that show.
Oh, go ahead.
He's had a best-selling book and a clothing apparel line.
That's still
actual things have happened from that show.
That clothing line still is running even after the show, and they actually donated their profits recently
to like NAACP.
Yeah, to help the cause over the last couple of weeks, which is fantastic. So, yeah, it's an amazing show. I don't know, it's amazing. But in the meantime, Danny, what have you been getting into over the last couple of weeks?
I've also been reading a lot. I read Trick Mirror by Gia Tolentino. I think there's 9 essays. She's a writer for The New Yorker and just like a general kind of like popular millennial TM. She's I really like her voice, and she just has a really I like the way she writes, so I recommend Trick Mirror. And I also just started, I've been tearing through this book by Brandon Taylor called Real Life. It's a fiction book about a Black queer man who is going to graduate school, I think at the University of Wisconsin. And I mean, it's just like insight into his life and his like white friends, and he's studying biochem, I think, and it I don't know, it's like very it delves into like trauma and race, and I got it from the library yesterday and I'm almost done. It's just I couldn't put it down. So I recommend that one too. And I also started The Great on Hulu. It's a series about Catherine the Great. It's like a comedic period drama, way more comedy than like drama, really, and it's hysterical. It's so fun. Like it's just like absurd, and it plays on like exaggerated like stereotypes, like, and like she gets a bit like there's bears just wandering the castle they're in Russia, and like it's just so funny, but it's like kind of educational also, and like you can kind of like dig through like the kind of the comedy and like find the history, and then also they have an episode where they like fake invent the Moscow Mule because they're in Russia. It's really funny. It's only 10 episodes, and I'm already 8 episodes in. I just started a few days ago. It's really, really good. Yeah. And I started a podcast called Rabbit Hole, about what the internet is doing to us. And it's kind of scary, but it's really good.
Nice. Well, with that, a few decent things to check out in there, but we have our own rabbit hole to go down right now with the second half of Steppenwolf by Hermann Hesse. I listened back to the last episode and I said Hesse when introducing it, even though I said the correct way to pronounce it at the beginning of the episode.
Yeah.
Hermann Hesse's Steppenwolf.
But I also looked it up, and like there are allegedly several different, like I've heard Hesse or Hesse also, like in a pronunciation guide.
Well, so, just like Hermine or Hermione, we're gonna leave it to the user, but we're gonna pass it over to Corey because he was the one that had brought this to our attention for the podcast. So Corey, we're gonna toss it over to you to get discussion started with a little bit of the summary of the second half of Steppenwolf.
Yeah, so where we left our buddy Harry, he had just met this intriguing woman. He was very desolate, and he was contemplating suicide, and this woman just mystified him, and it just opened up his world almost. So after he meets this woman, he basically, his whole life changes. Like, he's now, like, going out. He's dancing. He is laughing. He's doing all these new things and trying to come to terms with what that means for him, and if, like, this is his new purpose. And all these little rabbit holes, as you mentioned, follow. Is that a
well, including this, the very end of this, can you give us like the briefest summary of that, the very end there?
Okay, so the woman that he meets tells him at one point that she says, I'm gonna make you fall in love with me, and then I'm gonna ask you to do something, and you're gonna do it. And he's like, what's that? And she's like, you're gonna kill me. And he's like, all right. And then
it literally was that easy.
He's more like, I knew it. I knew that.
Yeah, he was Mr. Know-It-All about this girl. And so then, I mean, the end of it is just, I don't know what to make of it, because I don't know if it's drug-induced or if it just all of a sudden turned into some fantasy realm.
Yeah, and we can get into it more in the discussions if you want to talk about that, but just like, even, just getting up to where we get to there. Yeah,
so, I mean, just to briefly state it, he goes into some like weird magic funhouse and kind of explores like different aspects of his life, and then tries to come to terms with, should I live this out or should I still kill myself?
What a choice, Harry.
What a choice. So yeah, where do we want to start with this? Because it really feels like, Jamie and I just briefly mentioned this, if our section had been moved over a mere 2 pages, it literally would just be like this totally different half. If we hadn't met, did we ever decide on how to pronounce her name? We said
Most
whatever.
Of us said
Hermione. So
Hermione.
So if we hadn't,
I looked it up.
I'm sure.
I think we were saying both. I think we were saying both. So it just felt like 2 totally different halves here, and something that had come to me a little bit after thinking about that is we had all these dichotomies. Do you think that this halfway split was a purposeful thing given how this story was written, or do the details of the back half kind of dispel that? Just I just kind of want to get your guys' thoughts on how the story had changed and how you kind of perceived that, and how you liked it in comparison to what the story was before.
That's an astute observation, actually. You got a little right brain, left brain going on.
Corey, I got the astute stamp again.
Don't encourage him.
But yeah, I mean, it like those are the thoughts that happen, and for a man to be able to, and I'm talking about Hermann Hesse, the author, for him to be able to write both in the same book, I feel like it might have been a challenge, but at the same time, it seemed like it was paralleled to his own mindset in a way. So I think everyone within us has some degree of this balance. I don't know about you all, but
yeah, I don't know. We talk about we talk about how we divide these books. Like, it's arbitrary. Like, we just divide them in half, and like this was very on the nose. I feel for out of all of the books that we have divided in half, this was like, within like a page or two, it was like kind of like turned on a dime a little bit. So I don't know. I don't know that it was like intentional to be so exact. But it definitely feels like he wanted to almost like give us equal halves, kind of like equal experiences for how we met him, and then like how he like lived kind of this new life with Hermine for like the whole second half,
Yeah, and I think that it was something that we had kind of talked about just because we had only had that brief hint at the end of the first section of like, what are your predictions for the second half? We had kind of alluded to like, yeah, it'll probably be more fun. It was a lot more fun, in my opinion. We had kind of been like, oh, she'll be around, he'll be dipping his toes into it. But the back half is filled with so much music and so much dancing and so much socializing.
And sex and orgies. So there were like multiple orgies and drugs also.
Yeah, and we were talking about in the first half how many, I think, to quote Corey roughly, there were only like 3, if you're talking in a summary sense, like 3 verbs of like things that were done, and one of them was thinking. You know, like
reading.
Yeah, thinking, reading, and whatever else. And I think the book really opened up a lot, and this is just something that, you know, I've thought over time with a lot of books that I've read, is this stubbornness to keep going, because I don't even think that there was, even within the preface, and maybe you guys have a different thought on this, that I don't even think there was much of a hint on how much this book was going to open up within the preface, even getting introduced to, you know, this other character that visits Harry in his house. This was something that I just had nothing to lead me to think that this book was going to change in any way. And I think what I had said last time is that I thought it was just going to be this philosophical text only, where it's just a man's musing only. And I think that I almost got more out of what those thoughts were supposed to like signify and maybe pass on to you as a reader through, you know, all of these actions that were taken, as opposed to just talking about it in the first half. And I enjoyed it a lot more, but yeah, just curious on any other thoughts on that.
I think that I think I agree with you, if I'm understanding what you're saying, but I'm confused. I know that this was published a long time ago, but I'm confused as to why the first half is so unbelievably dry. Like, it gets into such an interesting story, and I feel like we could have gotten there much quicker. Like, the Steppenwolf manifesto, like, little booklet that he gets on the street at the beginning that, like, tells him about his life is so long. And it was the thing that turned me off in the first half, because it just went on forever, and it was just like philosophical musings that were very repetitive for like 50 pages. I feel like it could have been 3. And so I am confused about the trajectory of the story, like why that took up so much space, when I agree that I think that the action that happens in the second half like has a lot of the same message, but in a much more interesting way. And I don't know how much, like, editors were a thing in when the
it was 1800s. Just purely he didn't have anyone telling him to shut up, so he was just like, yeah, I don't know, this is what I think. I don't actually think that, but maybe it's possible.
Yeah, I don't know. I just feel like if this were published today, an editor would have been like, hey, you go on about this for a really long time. Maybe let's cut it back a little bit.
I mean, I feel like the only thing I can think of is that, like, he's just trying to prove a point about, like, how alone and in his head, and how long he's been contemplating all of this, you know, like, and he's also, like, he's writing all of this down. Like, this is something that the nephew is reading. Like, this is something that, like that Harry recorded. And so, I mean, I don't know. You could almost, like, make the argument that, like, Herman wasn't writing it. Like, Harry was writing it. And he just, like, kind of opined for, like, a long time. And I feel like it's supposed to just, like, signify, like, how long he's been, like, kind of, like, dwelling in that, like, discontent and, like, frustration and sadness and all of those things. I don't know that it was very necessary, but I think that it did the trick.
We were lulled into a false sense of security, I think, in the first half. But you know, that's just where his headspace was, like you guys were saying. Plus, Jamie, we had to get to 50% to make it that even split.
But
I don't.
I like, subscribe to that, actually, though.
Does it need to be fully that? I also think, though, there could have been more, like, There could have been more about his lonely life in the first half that wasn't through that, like, little manuscript he got on the street. Like, that's my complaint more, is that it's so much that. Like, and that's not, at least my understanding is not Harry's writing. Like, that's a little manuscript that he picked up and then he copied down fully.
Yeah. That specifically,
That's the thing I have a problem with.
But go ahead, Danny.
I feel like that it goes on for so long, and we learn shockingly little about his actual life. Like, for how long it goes on, we learn a little bit, but like we don't learn a ton throughout the book about his like previous circumstances, right? Like
he was talks married, about he had another lover, kind of.
Right, but like we barely. I feel like I don't know. I would have been interested to like know more about what made him so very miserable. Although, I don't know, he talks about it kind of vaguely. I just feel like he goes on for so long, and that manifesto kind of goes on for so long, and we don't learn very many specifics, except for kind of just like a lot of going on about things.
Yeah, and as far as his past life is concerned, I don't know if we learned about like a turning point, because in the present, like when we're reading the book, there is most definitely a turning point. But yeah, his past is just like, I guess he was always that way. Is that what we're to surmise?
Yeah, I will say though about the manuscript in particular, I'm not totally saying that the length itself, like that maybe more could have gone on to the backstory, but I think that like diving that deep into this strict dichotomy of, the bourgeois man and the, wolf that's more primal, like getting that deep into, I suppose, like the philosophy of that helped to me helped make the end have more impact for me, because it like broke even that part of the book too. Like I think that it was the first half, not only in his unhappiness but also looking internally as well, into something that maybe it would have been more difficult for Harry to surmise himself, that like we get that aspect of it, of like the very, very internal as far as like the desires of the soul, and then also like his societal place and his loneliness, that helped like break both of those to some degree, because I feel like even in the back half where we're getting this more exciting part, it's breaking two things. First, when we get to Hermine and her getting him to dance and socialize, like that was the first part of like Harry's like outward person, and then we get into the theater, which gets a lot deeper than that and even breaks out of a lot of what we were seeing with like things were black or white or fun and not, it starts getting into a lot of more complex ideas that I think helped like be set up by that long detour into this Steppenwolf manuscript. And I thought it helped make the end more impactful. But maybe it did go on too long, but I think that, like, in hindsight, I liked it more and it made more sense to me after having gone through the second half.
I still think it could have been, like, 3 pages. I feel like it was so repetitive and I could have gotten the same ideas. Like, I feel like after reading so many pages of that in the first half, I didn't come away with, like, a new understanding than I had in the first 3 pages of it. But maybe that's just me, and that's okay.
No, I mean, I agree with you.
And it doesn't mean I disliked it. Like, looking back, like, I enjoyed the novel as a whole. I just, if I had been Hesse's friend when he was writing this, I would have been like, hey, maybe you could cut out 10 pages here. Maybe.
Do you think he had friends when he was writing this? I mean, I feel like that's a legit question.
I don't know.
Given
Yeah, I
the-
mean, he doesn't sound like he had friends. Like, just based on Harry's character, honestly. Like, if he identifies so strongly with Harry, like...
Didn't we say that there was something that he himself had specifically said that this was, like, based in some, like, autobiographical way to his own life?
It's described as his most autobiographical work, but I don't know
By
if
him, though?
I don't know if he said that.
Okay.
But also, I think people, like, inferred that, like, especially because...
The HH thing?
Yeah, but also even, I read something that, like, there were, like, other parallels with other characters that were, like, pretty obvious. Like, Pablo the saxophonist he represented a real person Hermann Hesse knew.
Yeah, I saw
and,
that.
And so, like, I think there were things that, you know, if he didn't want it to seem autobiographical, he could have tried a little harder to, like, hide it. And I don't think that he did.
All right.
So should we get into the finale of the book in the magic room?
Yeah, I would
Because
like
I feel
to
like there's a
talk about
lot.
Yeah, definitely.
There's a lot to unpack there, and I think the most so basically he finds that he goes to some party. But stuff gets kind of fuzzy here because he's looking for Hermione. He wants to, like, hook up, I guess. And so is it at the party where he finds a door and then, like, goes through and then there's, like, all of these other doors?
Yeah,
that have,
he
like,
first-
words.
He had to go to hell first.
He had to go to hell. He was given a little claim ticket at the coat check that said "Find Hermione in hell" or something like that.
And also
Yeah.
the for Mad Men thing
Men
came
only,
back
it
up.
was
yeah.
on there, and he got a admission, whatever. But
Took a
hell
quick
was like
detour.
a basement room. Like
Yeah, it was like another room.
A very well put together thematic room. There was a
Yeah.
lot of effort into this hell theme.
And then he finds Hermine, who is cross-dressing, and he
As
can't
Herman.
as Herman, and he can't dance with her because
Again,
she
subtle.
looks like a man. And there's so much in that to unpack alone that I was fascinated by, and like the sexual politics going on during that dance.
It was so erotic for so many pages where he was just like, I want to kiss and touch her, but she's a man. She was like male presenting for like a few pages.
Yeah, he's
and
like,
then all
she
of a
is
sudden,
my best childhood friend and Herman, but I want to make love to her.
and then
it
also
was
like
so much.
a little bit like himself. I don't know. I feel like he saw a little bit of himself. I don't know. It was very. It was like. It was very. The whole scene, I feel like I could have pictured in like a movie as like an alcohol-induced kind of just like everything was like very hazy. There were like drugs involved. People were cross-dressing. Like I feel like I could see it play out as like a movie scene very clearly.
It was
I think he
Moulin
did a really
Rouge-y.
good job.
I was about to say
Yeah.
that it was Moulin Rouge. Yeah, Brian hates that movie so much.
But it was definitely Moulin Rouge.
Yeah.
So anyway,
yeah, I
past
think-
that to get to the theater though.
Yeah, so everything's happening, whatever. Eventually, Hermine leaves and comes back dressed as a woman in, like, a perfect, beautiful ball gown. And they finally kiss while dancing. And then basically everyone leaves. And this part is a little foggy of, like, how the three of them go to the theater. Which they have a name for. What is the name for it?
The Magic Theater?
Yeah, I think
Magic
it was
Theater.
just the
Magic,
Magic Theater.
And I don't fully know how they get there, because it is just in the same building, I think. Right?
Yeah, I think it's supposed to be unclear. I'm reading right now, and I just cannot even find, like...
Well, we know that it's definitely whatever it is in walking distance because in the first half he sees the sign for it and then gets directed to because I think this was in the same place that he'd even seen
Yeah.
Met Hermine.
yeah in the first place.
Yeah.
He says that Pablo took them upstairs. So
Okay.
so it's in the same like vicinity. It's in the same building, it seems.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then-
And this is the moment where they're in a giant theater kind of that has like a horseshoe shape bunch of doors
and mirror.
and a mirror.
Yeah, I was picturing it like a literal like fun house.
Yeah.
Like I couldn't, because also there were so many drugs. He took some drugs, right? Pablo,
I think that was at the beginning of the experience. Pablo had some cigarette of some sort.
And some beverage, a mysterious
And a beverage as well, yeah.
Like, 'cause I think-
a quaint little bottle.
Yeah. Which, who knows what was in that. But I think one of the notes that came with that invite was, like, the cost to enter is, like, your mind or something like
Yeah.
that. So you just knew whatever coming next was going to be a trip.
Yeah, so that's, I think, the question here, because we get into a lot of insanity when he goes up to the Magic Theater. Like, there's all these doors labeled with different things, and it's all stuff, like, related to his life. And he goes through a few of them, and we see these vignettes. But how are you all interpreting this series of events? Like, are we saying purely hallucinations from the drugs? Does he actually kill Hermine? I can't decide.
I can tell my interpretation. I have not looked it up to know if there's any like weight behind it, but I thought two things. Number one, that Hermine didn't even exist, and it was just like a figment of his imagination, because that's like a common trope.
I wondered that too.
I thought
personally.
about that, yeah.
And then the funhouse, and like since all the doors had memories on them, like listed on them, and he saw some, I thought like, oh, his life is flashing before his eyes, and he's gonna take his life right now. But I think since that didn't ultimately happen and he killed Hermine, maybe he was just killing that side of him. And I don't know. We don't know what happens after that. So there's really no like confirmation you can have. But that was my interpretation, which could be completely off base.
Yeah, I think definitely because Pablo at the end, you know, this whole experience is kind of bookended with this cigarette.
Mm-hmm.
That, like, it seemed to me to be like a guided trip, like in the drug sense. Like, I think that drugs were involved, but I don't think that like the lessons here were not real, or, you know, all these things that he was experiencing was not real, because it seemed like Pablo was, upon realizing at the end, you know, where Pablo is, you know, shape-shifting and like getting new faces, but ultimately he is there at the end when things seem to chill out a little bit, because we get to this climax with the killing of the real or not real Hermine, and then Pablo's there at the end to be like, you failed the fun house, kind of. Like,
Yeah.
you failed it.
He can't come back for 12 hours or something.
But then it also still bookended by this cigarette. And so, like, to me it seems like, you know, it's part of like a Pablo thing with the drugs.
Yeah, and with the cigarette, at the end he like puts the cigarette back in his
Yeah.
pocket, and also like shrinks Hermine and puts her in his pocket.
Yeah, I thought she was fully. I did think that Hermine was there and that he had killed her until the last page when he says that Pablo took Hermine and shrank her and put her in his pocket, and then I was like, oh, that actually made me kind of rethink the entire last scene, and I was like, this was fully drugs. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if the point was him just like, he was just sitting in a room and just like tripping hard as fuck, and like. I mean, I really, like, thought I was... And also, reading a little bit about it after the first half, like, a lot of people were critical of this book because of the very blatant way that Hermann Hesse, like, talks about and very, like, aggressively, almost pushes, like, drugs and tripping. And, like, I don't know. I think that contributed a little bit, because for a while I was like, oh, maybe there's doors. Maybe he's just, like, going into rooms but is hallucinating. I feel like he was maybe just, like, sitting in the room with Pablo and was just, like, on a really aggressive trip.
But also, like, this theater existed and, like, the idea of it existed, like, outside of all of that. And I feel like, didn't they have the drink and the cigarette upon getting into the room anyway? So, like, that's kind of interesting. I'm not denying the existence of the room. Yeah. But, like, all of the doors and everything, and, like, Pablo still being this close acquaintance, you know, there's just something about that. And then also, you know, I just feel like there's something outside of that, because also there was somebody outside of the theater at the beginning that, like, kind of led Herman to Harry. Harry, because they're the same person, leading him into this path to eventually come back to the theater. Like, he was intercepted somewhat on the street.
But that's like, can we trust anything that he says? If we're going to get to the end and say that possibly Hermine is totally a figment of his imagination, can we trust any of this? Like, he wrote this all down, and we know that. And then he just left. So can we trust that any of that happened?
Well, actually, to also talk about this, though, in the preface, I think we get some confirmation about her existence, because it talks about the woman that comes to Harry's room twice.
Oh, by a third party, yeah, by the tenant.
Which I think is an important thing as to why, you know, we were like, well, what was the point of the preface?
But there was a woman coming to Harry's apartment occasionally before he met Hermine also. Like, do we know for sure that that's who that's referring to? Because he had kind of that lover that he talks about at the very beginning, and then Hermine, when she first, like, gives him Maria, is like, I know you don't want to because you have this woman that you need to let go of in your mind. So I just don't know that we can, like, 1,000% say that that is her.
Well, either way, I want to also touch on the dialogue with Mozart, because yeah, it just, like, if you just throw that into the discussion, it's just like, wait, what, Mozart?
I love that Brian said something like, and then as we get to the end, when, like, things have kind of chilled a little bit, and, like, I look at the last page and it's like, and then Mozart said, and I'm like, oh, so we've chilled, but keep in mind that chilling means that he's talking to Mozart.
Yeah. So it's almost like in the first half when he had that dream with Goethe, which, like, both artists in their own right, and both of them kind of criticized Harry for, like, his way of life. It's just like, hey, you appreciate us and our artistry, but you really don't get life, man. Like, you need to chill a little bit, and you need to laugh more, and art is not that serious. And I thought there was actually, like, a very profound nature in that, because you know, people can take art very seriously, and then, you know, what does that say? Like, how do they take life in that regard? And I feel like that was his entire challenge, this book, was, you know, the wolf versus man. Like, are you really going to let the wolf just dictate your life, or are you going to, you know, be a man and actually live a life?
Yeah, and the interesting thing, which that is a good point with Goethe and Mozart both taking him down a peg. I had kind of only thought about Mozart because it was more in our face at the end there, but that is an interesting point that both of them are like, hey, dude, you're doing this wrong. But what is kind of interesting, though, is, like, when bringing that up, because Mozart kind of, like, brings up the point about the laughter, that sometimes it feels sinister as well, though, because, like, a lot of the laughter was described as, like, terrifying,
like demented, and it's mostly coming from Pablo, right? And
so, like, he heard it from, like, multiple sources to some degree.
Like, Mozart is laughing too. He describes it as cold and eerie.
Yeah, and so that's something that like I had I felt like that was very purposeful too. Like that first layer of like, hey, you're taking things so seriously, including our art, but like this laughter side of it, like it felt like there was more to it than just like a jolly like laugh to get by to some degree. I felt like it wasn't just like everything is, you know, as lighthearted. It's like, don't take it that seriously, but also like I feel like he had referenced that it is still serious, but like don't take it. I don't know. Like that was an interesting point too. I felt like Mozart came in and it wasn't just like a, hey man, chill out a little bit. like there was.
Yeah, he was like being very critical, and like I mean, even during the laughter, like you were just saying, like he like is like derisively like laughing at him, like almost being like, why, like you're such an idiot. It feels a little bit like Harry's kind of like subconscious is like creeping in, and like he's now like he's like bumming that like Goethe and Mozart have both like come in and been like, you're an idiot. Like they're kind of putting him down with like the way they're laughing at him.
Yeah, but like it also still didn't feel like a total takedown either, because like the interesting thing, because you're talking about like Mozart does get into the last page, which it's true, like the chill part of it is that like all the other doors that we explored got into like the horrific nature of war and like relationships to others, but like in the end it does, even after all the sinister laughter, like it doesn't make me feel like it's a total negative thing, because like the very end is a very positive sentiment, which was the most surprising thing in a book full of hallucinations and Mozart popping in, that like we didn't truly get either death that we were promised, either with Harry's suicide or with Harry's murder of Hermine, and that it did end in like try it again, enjoy it more. Like that was also again like such a 360 at the very end of like, whoa, that's not what I was expecting. But again, I don't feel like it was something that the message was like everything's all good. I think the sinister part of it and showing all these things is like there's still rough parts out there, but like Harry's way of dealing with it is a little too serious.
Yeah, I feel like Mozart acknowledges that in their conversation. He says something along the lines of like, we're all born with guilt, you should know that, but like kind of you can live with it. Yeah. Like he laughs at he mocks his religious education. He's like, any good school would teach you that you're born with sin and guilt. Yeah.
Yeah, I did save a quote that I liked, which basically sums up what Brian said. Mozart said to Harry that, learn what is to be taken seriously and laugh at the rest. Which is just a nice little, like, you know, I said in the first half that, you know, I complained about what are you leaving for me, like as a reader, like what lessons are you leaving? And I thought that was a pretty good one there at the end. Like there was actually many more takeaways, but that was like the main one.
Yeah, and it was nice that, like, again, because this half and half thing I still subscribe to a lot, because even at the end of the first half, we got down to the point where, like, Harry was going down to the dregs of, like, I'm killing myself tonight. Like, I'm not even waiting to my birthday. Like, it was at that level before he goes and gets this drink and everything changes. And then, like, it was like a steady day crescendo and then a steady crescendo up to this, like, very positive point, which, like, was a very nice thing that I wasn't expecting. But, like, I thought that was an interesting trajectory, too, where it felt, like, very linear in those directions.
Yeah. It's hard for me to call the ending, like, wholly positive. Because I understand the message is there, and I probably... Hermine is some sort of figment of his imagination, but, like, he does stab her. Like, that is part of the end. And, like,
but he talks about her influence on him doing so, though.
I know, but I still don't know that that's, like, fully positive. I don't know that I can call that fully positive at the end. Like, he goes through that room where he's, like, seeing all of his old lovers and he's feeling good, and then he comes upon Pablo and Hermine together, like, lying naked together, and he states that he's kind of, like, overcome with jealousy.
But that's his failing, too. Like, that's what gets called out, where, like, the positive part is the hope. And instead of, like, you have learned your lesson, it's just like, you did it wrong, let's try it again, and here's what to move forward with. Like,
yeah, I get, I'm saying the messages, but you said, like, the whole second half was a crescendo of positivity, and I disagree with that statement. That's what I'm saying.
I don't know if I agree with that, just because, like, we were still getting to that point where, like, that was her dictation to him anyway.
That doesn't make it positive.
I think it is to me because of, like, the lessons that he's learning through this experience in the theater. Like, if we're going to a figment of your imagination type of conversation, like, what he's going through here at the end is, like, finally getting these lessons in his face where, like, he's not actually affecting the people around him. It's just, like, him getting over this final hump. But that's just my opinion. I'm not saying that that's correct. But, like, that's what it feels like to me, because it feels so psychological that a lot of it is, like, here I'm as low as I can be. Oh, I'm interacting with people. I'm learning to enjoy things. And now I'm, like, learning lessons on the final frontier within my own psychology. Like, that's kind of where it feels like that path is going. But that's just personal in this case. What do you guys think?
I think that I agree with Brian. I feel like I don't know, like, it's almost like he's able to, like, learn all of these lessons, like, in a vacuum without consequence. Like, he kills Hermine, but, like, she's not real. And so then it's kind of just like Mozart kind of confronts him, and he's just like, I don't fucking know what's right. I'm trying to figure it out. And, like, it's not ideal that he stabbed her, but, like, but I don't know. I feel like he's just, like, trying really hard to, like, learn a lot of lessons. And even at the end, the last line when he says, Pablo was waiting for me in Mozart too, like, I don't know. I felt like that was, that felt very, it felt very hopeful to me.
I agree that
very hopeful.
I agree that the end feels hopeful. I guess what my question is like, what does Hermine symbolize as a character or as a figment here? Like, if she is the person who brings his life around, like, she's the one who kicked him into gear and said, like, get up off your ass and stop complaining and do things that are fun just because they're fun, and then he murders her, like, what does that say? Even if she's fake, and even if he learns something from it, like, is he killing that side of his personality? What is he doing?
Well, I'll let somebody else go in, because I already said something, unless you don't have, because I do have
it's all you.
No, I don't know. I agree that that's bad. Like, I agree that doesn't look great.
Well, I'll say this is, like, if we're even looking at, because this is something I kind of alluded to earlier, that was an interesting point, that, like, this whole novel we get, like, again, only this comparison of, like, black and white, the primal with the bourgeois, like, the fun side and the depressing side. When we get into the actual theater here, and we start seeing that, like, there's so much more than that, when he's, like, looking into the mirrors, and you start getting this lesson with, like, the chess pieces, for instance, and like, when he does get presented with all of these different facets of himself, and, like, how intertwined the wolf side is with the man side, that it almost, like, dispels that, you know, it is only A or B. And, like, part of it that I thought was interesting is, like, we're talking about the opposite parts of, like, Harry and Hermine is, like, we have most of the stuff with how fun she is and how, like, depressed he is, but they both have, like, this isolation aspect to them, because it's not like all of her qualities were completely positive either, because she had certain things where she's, like, some of the negative things that you've experienced, I have. And, like, at a point in time where we met her where she was presented as a total opposite, to have that certain moment, especially, like, later on that section for her to explain those similarities, I felt like that was part of it, that, like, the positive side is getting rid of maybe the negativity that, like, is still part that can hold back from, you know, the positive aspects of either. It was interesting that they both had, like, this negative aspect in relation to each other when everything else was so opposite. So, like, that could be something. It's just, like, a brief theory into it. But, like, I felt like that part was very telling, that was such a specific part of the second section where, she, you know, at the beginning, it's like, we are exact opposites except for the point where they have this conversation where it's like, but in this regard, we are the same. Like, that was something to it. So, like, him killing her, like, that could be a part of him if she's, like, maybe not actually real. Like, killing the negative aspects of the wolf, killing the negative aspects of Hermine, killing the negative aspects of, like, all these different stages of his life. It felt like that was kind of the journey we were going on to, and, like, he didn't reach it at the end because, again, Pablo, like, says he fails. But, like, to me, that's just kind of what I got away from it, is, like, distilling away all these negative aspects to move forward with more hope. That's why it feels like a steady crescendo, because, like, you're steadily knocking all of those things off. But that's just, like, my own theory on it, because I felt like that part was kind of an important thing in the second half.
I want to hear somebody else's. I want to hear what Corey thinks.
Yeah, I mean, it was just very difficult because, well, first off, I'm averse to debauchery, so it's just all automatically. So, I don't know. There was a feeling of, like, balance. I think, like, instead of having two individuals, like, in separate bodies, you know, and I'm playing this as she was imaginary. Again, don't know if that's true. But if, like, let's say she was, like, that's not Harry. So, in a way, you have to make both of these things into Harry. Or I guess you just become Hermine or something, you know? It's like you become schizophrenic to a point. And, I mean, his life almost was that entire way, too, because he was, like, all, you know, like, I'm too good for this world. This, like, I'm not dealing with you. And now he's, like, all drugs and sex and dancing. Like, it was a shock to the system, and he struggled with it. Like, he was really, like, this is not who I am. But, like, you could, and he saw in the mirror there was the wolf and the man were tussling with each other. So, I mean, my interpretation was that it was becoming one, like, as Harry.
Yeah, that's more succinctly put, but I agree with that, like, I think that they were all part of, I think that's what they were getting to, even with Hermine, like, that was an important part of, like, who Harry is. But with that, we do, because we're just running out here, it's kind of hard because this, like, last section hit so many areas, but we do have to kind of get into some final thoughts here, however we want to do that. So this can be a total free reign of, like, any other loose ends to tie up, any other interpretations, but we are hitting about the hour mark, so, like, definitely flesh it out as much as you want, but we can just kind of go around from there. Does anybody want to start with anything?
I'll just finish up. I thought a lot about the beginning of the book and how I will perceive this book later in life. You know, that was my whole deal with in the first half, and I mean, I don't really think that anymore. I would like to read it later in life just to see what's up, but and how it would affect me differently. But it almost encourages me to, like, not take moments for granted, you know, and to not take things, like, he took things so seriously and then went off the deep end. And I've seen that with friends, you know, like, you have a straight edge friend and then they get a taste of alcohol, and then next thing you know, they're like really into it. It's like sad to see. So you need balance, in your life. And that's kind of what I'm hoping to take away from this.
Cool. Anybody else want to go?
I want to talk about, I don't know if any of you did the required listening that I sent. I hope
we did.
that you did.
We did.
So one thing that he taught, like the only reason that I bring this up is because Mozart's opera Don Giovanni was brought up, like was talked about quite a bit. And the last scene of Don Giovanni, no spoilers, you should see it, is that like the womanizer, Don Giovanni, is like being dragged to hell. He's getting his. Like karma is like he is, and it was interesting to me that like Harry's sort of like identified a little bit with like he brought this like this very like I don't know, like this opera with a lot of like symbolism, like and obviously like it's very I don't know, some of it's very obvious because like Don Giovanni gets literally dragged to hell and like that he goes to hell in the building. Like it's very like part of it is like very easy to like see. But I don't know, like it was just very layered. I feel like I like you could just go into the way that he compares himself almost to the main character of the opera, and then also like he talks to Mozart for so long, he talks to Goethe for so long. It's almost like a don't meet your heroes kind of thing, because like he met them both and then they were both just kind of like chill, like could you just like I don't know, I just really liked how like he alluded to the opera, he alluded to like kind of like identifying with like the main character of that opera in different ways. And then also just like I like the extended scenes where he talked to Goethe, where he talked to Mozart, because like it was just like almost a reflection of it wasn't like when you think about meeting the people that you admire and you're like, oh, they probably think that I'm like so great, they probably think that I'm like, they admire the way that I admire their works, and they both kind of like shot him down. And I don't know, I liked that he had a little bit of, his subconscious had a little bit of self-awareness and was kind of just like, he was like telling his own self to like chill out and like not take things so seriously. So maybe that, I don't know, maybe he had it in him like the whole time. I don't know. I don't have that many final thoughts because this last section was so dense that like I am overwhelmed. But I tore through the second half faster than I thought I was going to. I don't know, I finished it like days ago, and I really enjoyed it.
Danny, I agree with your sentiment of like I don't know how many final thoughts I have, because I feel like there's so much to delve into in that last chunk of text, and I don't know that I am there yet. I finished this today, so I'm still processing what happened at the end. But I agree, the second half was more enjoyable, much easier to read, I think, than the first half. I liked it. Like, as a story, I thought it was enjoyable. I would like to read more analyses of what people think is happening here. Because also, again, we talked about last episode how Hesse said that this was his most misunderstood work, so maybe none of us understand it.
Which is so, like, it makes so much more sense, because on the first half it was like, okay, I get it. Yeah. And the second half was like, it's not even fair to think people should.
Yeah, like, I don't...
to some degree.
I don't know that any of us have any grasp, because he claimed that no one understood it. So, I don't know. I enjoyed it. I liked reading it. I will probably read another Hesse. We have Siddhartha, and I've never read it, so yeah, that's all I've got.
Yeah, I definitely think, some of the discussions here, it's not even to assume that any of us know anything about it. I think that that's part of what's cool about the ending, is like there could be so many interpretations, and I doubt that any of us are correct, especially again given that he had said it's his most understood, and now it's very obvious as to why. But what I will say is, I still think that it felt positive overall to me, not in the fact that, like, I thought that Harry had an overall, like, happy ending per se, because, again, I still, like, call it back to, like, Pablo saying, you done fucked up. You did it wrong. But, like, here are lessons to learn. Keep trying. And, like, kind of moving him away from giving up and just being like, it's tough, but it's not that tough. You know, the laughter that continued to come up. I just felt like that was something that was nice, to not have a happy ending that was necessarily tied with a bow. Like, I feel like maybe we were halfway there, but it felt better to me because it was trending upward. I think that that's part of it that makes me, like, say this happy ending thing, not in the fact that, like, Harry has peaked, but the fact that he's getting there. I think that that was what was such a nice part about it. But I do think this is something I'd have to read again, because a lot of it was just it was just hard to take all of it in, because I think some of the ideas, especially with some of the more mystical elements, were things that I don't have that much understanding of. And then the last thing I'll say, I tried to look this up, but I had watched all of BoJack Horseman recently. The show ended this year, and there is an episode in the final season that was very evocative of this last section in Steppenwolf, which was kind of interesting. I tried to look up if there were any interviews with any of the writers or the showrunner or anything, and I didn't see anything, but it was kind of a similar, like, surrealist theater experience, and a similar message going forward of, like, here are the things that are wrong, you have done wrong, but, like, the hope is that you can keep trying. Like, that was essentially what it is. So that was kind of interesting, and I definitely recommend BoJack. And once you get to that episode, you'll definitely know what I'm talking about. But that was just something that I didn't see online that I found as a big connection there. But yeah, I definitely read more Hesse. Has anybody read any of his other books? Yeah.
No, but I want to read Siddhartha now.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I'd definitely be down to do that.
It's super short.
Overall, I really liked it, and it surprised me in the back half from the front. So good choice, Corey.
Yeah, I mean, from the first half, I was really scared that I'd give you guys a dud. But yeah, it was better than I thought it would be too. So
yeah, so cool. And with that, the last thing we have to do here that we had talked about is we're gonna briefly. Corey won't be joining us next time. Corey, we do hope you join us on the podcast again. It was nice having you on after all this time.
I'd love to be back, yeah.
But with that, we are now going to present what our next 3 books are going to be. So as we had mentioned, the way these seasons are set up as we do, the first 3 are chosen by the 3 of us. It goes me, then Jamie, and then Danny. And then our 4th one, which is where Corey has joined us, is where we kind of have a community pick. And thanks to Corey on this one. And now for the back half, we're going back around for the 3 of us to close out the 2nd season. So we're going to go ahead and go around and say our choices. So for next episode, this is going to be my pick. And we're going to do Omen Setter's Luck by William H. Gass. And I told you guys this, but just for everybody listening, I'd seen it described as kind of like a Midwest Gothic, which I think will be an interesting comparison to some of the Southern Gothic that we have read. So that'll be for next episode.
And then my pick is The Master and Margarita by Mikhail Bulgakov, which is a classic of... Everybody's laughing at me.
Jamie looked up how to pronounce the name so many times.
You said
so it has to be right.
Huh?
You said it so confidently.
I looked up how to pronounce it.
I know, and it was so confident.
classic of Russian literature. And I know that it's very, very controversial. It wasn't published until after the author died because he couldn't safely publish it, and it's a massive critique of Soviet life. But also the plot, the only thing I know about the plot is that the devil comes to Moscow. So I'm pumped.
Bring hell back, baby.
Yeah.
My pick is Oryx and Crake by Margaret Atwood. I wanted some other Margaret Atwoods, and they unfortunately didn't meet the page criteria that we have sort of chosen for this podcast. But I'm excited. This was sort of Jamie's rec to me, and I'm excited to read a non-Handmaid's Tale related Margaret Atwood.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. Well, with that, we have wrapped up the 4th book of the 2nd season. We are over halfway through our 2nd season, which is pretty nuts. Again, we appreciate Corey coming on. We need somebody to scat us out. Corey, because you were so willing last time, we'll give you the choice. You went above and beyond. If none of you have heard the end scat of last episode, definitely go back and give that a lesson. So we'll leave it up to you if you want to scat or not.
All right. Everyone pick a number between 1 and 10. Jamie.
6.
Brian.
4.
Danny.
7.
It was 5. So, all right. Between Brian and Jamie.
Rock, paper, scissors, no shoot. Rock, paper, scissors. Okay. That's me. We will catch you next time.
Bye.
Bye.